Hello, and thank you for joining us this evening for our countdown to Election Day 2025. My name is Alex Ross. I'm the Grassroots Program Manager here at EDF Action. We have a great lineup for you this evening about all the different elections that are happening across the country this November. In just 21 days, voters will decide several key races that could impact our climate progress. From the highest state offices to thousands of local officials, climate continues to be on the ballot. Before we introduce our guest this evening, I, of course, want to go over some basic ground rules. As always, if you have questions, please leave them in the chat. And to get us started, why don't you go ahead and share where you're calling in from or where you're joining us from this evening, and we would love to hear it. And we will have a short Q&A at the end, so we will try to address as many questions as possible. And then to start us off about some of the key elections that are coming up this year, I want to introduce our first guest, EDF Action's Associate Vice President of Political Engagement, Jack Pratt. Jack, welcome on.
Hey, thanks so much, Alex, and thanks for joining us. I'm glad to be with all of you today. I'm Jack Pratt, and as Alex said, I work on political engagement here, and wanted to provide some context and a little bit of overview of what's coming in the next few weeks and then months to follow on the election front. So starting, he's not on the ballot this year, but every election right now is influenced by the president, right? And even though there are no federal elections that are on the ballot next few weeks, those are also going to be sort of in the context of this unpopular president. And for those of us who have some concerns, real concerns about the actions that this president and his administration are taking on climate and the environment and public health, you'll be happy to see that voters are not happy with the agenda he's pursuing, right? And his job approvals at 43%, according to this New York Times average, and his disapprovals at 54%, which is bad. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see it's actually worse than that. And so one of the things that you don't see when you look at that sort of top line number is the intensity. And I think this is useful to note that if you look at, this is a chart from Elliot Morris, who does some great analysis of polling. This is just the Economist polls, but there's a lot of polls that back this up. The strongly disapprove, the people who really don't like the job that President Trump is doing, are at 46% in the last Economist poll, versus only 24% who say they strongly approve of what the president is doing. And that's notable because, again, out of sort of the total there, if you look, it's in this survey, 55% total disapprove. 46, again, strongly, like really don't like what he's doing. And so an election like the one that's on the way in a few weeks, the types of folks that are going to be motivated to go out and vote are more likely to be people who disapprove of the actions that President Trump takes. And again, if you look, this handy chart shows you that's beyond where President Trump was at this point in his last term. And it's well beyond where other presidents have been, Barack Obama, who of course lost a ton of seats at the state and local level and the federal level in his first midterm elections back in 2010. So this doesn't bode well for the Trump policy agenda, which is, I think, useful context for us. So if you go to the next slide, we have a sense of where our issues play, right? So, the key issues here on front of people's minds, honestly, as everybody I think knows at this point, are sort of cost of living and those sort of pocketbook issues. And those tend to rise above issues related to the environment. However, the environmental issues and the cost of energy really is kind of entering more sort of front of mind. And so this is a slide from a survey we did around the Trump mega bill, the Trump budget bill, as it was passing. And we tested the provisions that everybody talks about, right? The cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to food stamps, and some of those other provisions that were in that big Republican budget bill. And those are extraordinarily unpopular, right? The cuts to Medicaid at 59% strongly opposed are just deeply, deeply unpopular. And so by that standard, it's hard for anything to measure up against it. That said, if you look at the top of that slide, you see the energy provisions, things like the pause, they said, or the 10-year reprieve they gave to oil and gas polluters, fossil fuel companies, on the methane pollution. That has 43% strongly opposing. So that's a lot of people that are opposed, again, with some intensity to that reprieve. And the other provisions around, exemptions for oil and gas activity, and the cuts to tax credits for clean energy, those are all really unpopular too. And so, again, the context here is that certainly you're going to hear more concern about healthcare, more people talking about those sort of more front of mind pocketbook issues, but those rollbacks that the administration is doing on our issues, the issues that we're fighting for, are really unpopular to voters as well. And you're starting to see those more and more as we turn to the elections that are right in front of us. So we go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about utility costs, right? And so, again, the last election, I think everybody knows that the price of eggs was sort of the thing that was reported on, that voters were concerned about, and Donald Trump was president because he was going to fix the price of eggs, and sort of the price of groceries at large. Groceries are still top of mind when we ask people about what is concerning to them. This question is graded as the 3 things that matter most in terms of cost right now, and groceries are at the top, but right behind them is utilities. And we're hearing more and more stories of voters who are concerned about their utility costs, and of course that's related to the previous slide, because the president and Congress just voted to gut the clean energy tax credits that helped add more energy to the grid. It's clean energy, so that's good for everybody here, I think. But it's also, look, it's more energy, more wind, more solar, more storage. Those are all things that are going to add more energy to the grid. But by cutting those, and you see now that the administration is just actually stopping projects that were moving ahead, based on permits and other misuse of administrative actions. That's going to impact the cost that people are paying for their utilities. And so that issue's much more sort of front of mind now. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that they know it, right? The administration is out there trying to blame us, right? You've got Chris Rogers, the Secretary of Energy, saying that, look, when you have wind and solar, prices on the grid go up because the stability goes down. And conversely, Trump, this is from a year ago, but Trump has been pledging to reduce prices based entirely on, more fracking, more drilling. But that doesn't work, right? We're seeing it now. We're almost 12 months into his term now. And not only has he not cut energy prices in half, utility bills are going up. And so they've got to figure out how to blame somebody else for this, because their policies are not doing the job. And if you go to the next slide, this will transition into the elections that we have in front of us. In the next slide, this is particularly true in these 2 states right now, where we're seeing, if you live anywhere near New Jersey, you live near Virginia, you're seeing some ads on these issues, right? In New Jersey in particular, you're seeing a lot of ads where Mikey Sherrill, who's the Democratic candidate for governor there, is getting attacked with some really unfair ads that take some words totally out of context about clean energy and the cost. Her point was like, hey, clean energy is not just a nice thing to have now; it's actually cheaper. And if you look at states like Texas that are not a bunch of hippie states, right? They're just trying to add power to the grid. They're doing more and more wind and solar. And she's saying in New Jersey that they need to add more of that clean energy to the grid because it's fast. You can add that capacity quickly. But they've got an ad that takes that out of context and hits her pretty hard on that issue. On the other hand, she's led out, out of the gate, the first ad of the cycle, talking about how she's going to cut utility costs, and it's been a big issue of hers. In Virginia, it's really focused more around data centers. There's been a lot of discussion of data centers, and of course, data centers demand a ton more power. And where's that power going to come from? You've got to add power to the grid. And Abigail Spanberger, of course, wants to see more renewables. Those are fast. Again, like, they're clean, which is great. They're also cheap and they're fast. It's going to take a long time to set up like a new gas power plant. And you can add solar to the grid much faster and help meet that demand, and help reduce people's energy costs, or at least keep them from going up quite as fast. So we're already seeing this here in these elections right now, which is why it's so vital. Part of the reason it's so vital that Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill win these elections, in a few weeks. And just to note that 2025, because I sort of went here suddenly, we're all, I think, thinking about 2026 and the midterms and those federal elections. But these state and local elections are just vital. They're really important, to our issues. I mean, the governors of these two states are going to have enormous influence over their own states, and what they can do in terms of helping transition to cleaner energy and reducing pollution in their states. But even the more local elections that are in front of us, can be really critical. And so, thinking of things like, actually, it's not more local, but there's a retention race in Pennsylvania. If you're in Pennsylvania, there's a ballot where there's an effort to try and force a new election with a retention vote of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. There's some critical elections, like in Texas. There's a number of ballot initiatives, including a really critical one about water, to make sure that we have clean sources of water for the foreseeable future in Texas, which is just increasingly a really with climate change, absolutely essential policy. And that's a statewide proposal that's going on in Texas. This last Saturday, we just had some really critical races in New Orleans. New Orleans oversees the electric and all the utilities within its own geography. And so, there's a race where you might not think it has an impact on clean energy and climate and the environment, but it does. And so, those mayor's races are really critical. And of course, the delegate races in Virginia and the legislative races in New Jersey are obviously similarly important, just to make sure that the governors have some good allies to help them make some real advances on the legislative front. So those are the things that I think are the most front of mind. And turning, though, I just want to show one last slide if we can. Or did I not put that one up? Yeah, there we go. So just to note that, again, these state elections are absolutely critical, and we've got these two that are right in front of us. But again, next year we have another 36 governor's races. So there's 38 governor's races between now and 2026, and about half of them are open. So they're just like New Jersey and Virginia, where their incumbent governors are not running for re-election. There's about half of the governors on the who are currently incumbent who will not be running again, whether term limits or other reasons. So in terms of shaping the policies around our issues for the foreseeable future, the next couple of years will have just enormous impact. And obviously these two in front of us are going to have a really big symbolic impact that goes well beyond the elections that the states that they're actually competing for. But I think Alex is going to turn it over to our colleague in Virginia, who can explain a little more detail about the real concrete impact that Virginia election can have on policies in that in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jack, for that great overview. It sounds like there's still so much at stake, even in a quote unquote off year, right? And I really appreciate kind of what you were saying about the really framing the climate conversation around the cost of energy prices. I think that's something that a lot of folks can relate to, especially as we're leaving the summer months. I know my energy bills have been higher than normal and have definitely been top of mind. But like you mentioned, I do want to sort of hone in on Virginia a little bit more because I know we have some exciting work. Oh, let me bring you back there. Sorry about that. We have some exciting work that we're doing in Virginia. So please help me in welcoming our Director of Coast and Watersheds in Virginia, Emily Steinhuber. Emily, welcome on.
Thanks, Alex.
And so I have a couple questions for you too. But Emily, I want to get started with you first. Can you tell us kind of about the scope or the type of work that EDF is really involved in the state of Virginia?
Of course. And first of all, it is never an off year for elections in Virginia. Every single year we're electing local and state legislators. So in Virginia, we're working throughout the state to help Virginians adapt to climate change. We're really focused on that adaptation side here, particularly flooding, which is Virginia's largest climate threat. Sea levels here where I'm based in Virginia Beach have actually already risen nearly 20 inches since NOAA began collecting data, which they actually collect. The longest stream of data is on the Norfolk Naval Station. And we have that highest relative rate of sea level rise on the Atlantic coast. And just yesterday, tides were so high this time of year, and with the storm off the coast, we're not yet out of hurricane season, that my daughter's friends down the street couldn't get to school. The school bus couldn't drive through our neighborhood. But that's not all. Flooding affects Virginians throughout the state, including in far southwest, because we're seeing rainfall intensity, duration, and frequency go up by about 20%. Not a small amount, which impacts our built environment substantially. So on the ground here, we're focusing on 3 ways to advance climate resilience and adaptation: through building and ensuring that government is resilient at the local, state, and federal levels, and working to create resilient government. We're supporting nonprofit partners, and we're using science and economics to justify the case for building with and investing in nature as a tool to adapt to climate change. And finally, we're working to realign and reimagine past market and policy failures, like working on flood insurance and home insurance and the housing market, to find ways that we can really help Virginians move forward and reduce risk to climate change.
Amazing. That is such great work, and I feel like ties in so directly to what we're talking about this evening, especially with when you mentioned resilient government and really building out that leadership kind of through all levels. So I'm curious, sort of how has the makeup of the state legislature really sort of impacted our work, either positively or negatively?
Yeah, so Virginia is a pretty purple state. And over the years, I've had the pleasure of working with legislators and governors from both parties. Flood resilience is really a nonpartisan issue. But that climate action side had eluded us until 2020, and we hadn't actually invested in flood resilience, even if we were making some policy changes. But in 2020, under then Governor Northam, and legislators came in with a mandate to advance climate policies, Virginia became the state to take the boldest climate action in the Southeast and passed 2 landmark bills: the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which was a net zero goal by 2050, talk more about that later, and the Clean Energy and Community Flood Preparedness Act, which brought Virginia into a carbon reduction program and funded flood resilience and adaptation, which was key. So right now our government is divided, and while there's a lot of common ground on flood risk, we've backed down from some of our ambitious goals, and we've backed out of some of the programs that were funding flood resilience and reducing carbon pollution. Virginians are looking for sensible solutions. Agriculture is our largest economic sector. We're home to the largest naval base in the road, a few minutes away from me. And we're really proud of our natural resources, particularly the Chesapeake Bay. So we know that climate progress and investing in flood resilience and adaptation makes sense for our economy and our natural resources.
That's so great. I couldn't agree more. And I know that it is critical to really build out resilient infrastructure now more than ever. Jack, I wonder if you have any sort of thoughts about the legislature in Virginia and how that's kind of, from the political side of things, how that's impacted our efforts.
Well, look, it's a very closely divided legislature. The governor in Virginia, I think, as folks may know, is a strange position in that it's only one term. And so, the reason Abigail Spanberger is running for an open seat right now is because the current governor, Glenn Youngkin, only has one term there. And so you really want to make sure that she's able to hit the ground running and really pursue the agenda that we know will be a strong one for the Commonwealth, and try to tackle a lot of the problems that Emily was talking about. And so it's really critical that we're able to support her by also helping lift up some of those strong pro environment, political climate candidates running for the legislative positions.
Absolutely. And Emily, you had mentioned the Virginia Clean Economy Act. I know there's some other things like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that have been pretty sort of like hallmark pieces of legislation in the climate space. And I was wondering, for you on the ground, what does sort of protecting climate progress look like for Virginians?
Well, unfortunately, Governor Youngkin has withdrawn Virginia effective at the end of 2023 from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We call it RGGI, like the name. And it's a voluntary program to reduce carbon pollution in participating states that's been operating since 2009. There are currently 9 states participating, primarily in New England, and it's technology neutral, only applies to fossil fuel plants of a certain size. Each state adopts its own legislation, which Virginia did in 2020, and revisits caps to ratchet down the amount of carbon pollution that's allowed. It's a market-based program. And while Virginia was participating, we earned, because states get to get their revenue and invest it in how they see makes sense, we earned around $275 million in annual revenues per year. And 45% of that went to flood resilience and 50 went to energy efficiency programs, which is the cheapest way to reduce, and one of the best ways to reduce our energy demand. So there is ongoing legislation because that removal was against the legislature's will and illegal. But unfortunately, that set us back. Our emissions dropped 22% during those few years in RGGI, but they've bounced back up. And the programs that have been invested in flood resilience have been all the way here at the coast to Southwest Virginia as well. And the energy efficiency programs reduce the energy burden for those who need it most. Over $600 a house that participates in the program. However, the good news is the Virginia Clean Economy Act, our net zero goal, is still on the books. And though it is an uphill path, we're still holding strong on moving towards those goals. But it is incredibly important, as Jack mentioned, because our governor changes every year or every 4 years, that we continue to keep those goals on the books and develop and implement the programs that make that a reality.
Yeah, it's something I think about, and I think was proven very recently with the Inflation Reduction Act, right? These pieces of legislation can be very fragile when we lose, climate progress and the climate progress majority, for sure. And so I wanted to kind of steer a little bit because I know, Jack, at the beginning you had mentioned, Trump's approval ratings are pretty abysmal, lower than even his first term. And so, Emily, I'm sort of wondering, and Jack, feel free to respond as well, but how have the recent actions from the Trump administration been received by Virginians? And I know we touched a little bit on the polling, but I'm curious if you have any sort of local anecdotes for us.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, in addition to Virginia has a lot of federal employees, so we've seen that as well. But of course, we also have key agencies here, including NOAA, USGS, and others that support these climate programs. One small example that is actually a really big deal here, even if it seems pretty wonky, is I mentioned the rainfall changes, and that really impacts how we deal with adapting in our built environment. And a study was ongoing to update rainfall so that we were building to handle that water that's coming down and how fast and when it's coming down. And the changes of the federal government lately have hampered that study. And so we'll be building infrastructure today. We'll be building, whether it's a flood wall or a pond or whatever, we'll be building things to not hold the right amount of water because we paused a study. So it's just like small things like that are really adding up. Unfortunately, one of our partners down the street also lost a $20 million grant. That money was going to go towards implementing community developed flood solutions in a historically African-American community built by an African-American architect at the about 100 years ago. And that grant was pulled back as well. And so that community spent years coming up with solutions with their city and with this nonprofit partner. And now they don't get to build those projects that were at the parcel level, that were in their streets and in their parks. And that's really disappointing and really sad.
Yeah, especially I feel, these communities work to sort of make changes for some of the first times, right? And I think there's this misconception about, all these like climate dollars and where they went and who did they go to, but really it's going to like community funded projects that have a lot of thought and intention behind them. And yeah, it really is a shame. Jack, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on sort of some of those recent actions.
No, that's well said. I mean, I think that the numbers that I showed earlier around Trump's approval, the president's approval, are even worse in Virginia. And so that, they're bad across the country, and they're bad in communities across the country, but they're even worse in what we've seen in polling in Virginia. Which again, it's good. He's doing a lot of bad things, and it's important that people remember that they're not popular just because he is president and he won. It's a very powerful job, but it doesn't mean that he's engaging in all these rollbacks with the support of the American people. Again, they voted for cheaper groceries, maybe, which I don't mean to diminish that. That's a significant thing. It can be a significant hardship for folks. But that's what they voted for. They didn't vote for, some of the litany of consequences that Emily just went through, or for more pollution or more, toxic chemicals in their communities, and all the bad impacts that we're seeing on our issues around the country.
Alex, can I add just one more thing to that?
Please.
Jack just mentioned the costs of living, and I think we have a lot of data that shows that the cost in investing, whether it's in nature or other solutions to adapt to climate change before a disaster, it returns 13 to 1. Some studies show that you're avoiding over $33 in costs to recover. Those are big numbers. So when we roll back, as the administration currently has done, programs at FEMA during hurricane season, we're just moving that cost down the road. We're not actually saving it. In fact, we're spending a lot more.
That's an excellent point. The costs are going to just grow astronomically the more we put it off. Thank you both for that great discussion. Or actually, I do have one more question, and I think it's always one of the most important. So for our members who live in Virginia, what is the deadline to register to vote? and where can they find out more about their polling location?
Gosh, I don't have that handy right now, Alex. Let me see if we can.
Yeah, I was hoping you would know off the top of your head.
As the Virginia resident, technically the pre-registration closes 11 days before the election. However, don't let that be a deterrent. You can actually register the day of the election. You just have to fill out a provisional ballot as your vote. And Jack, I don't know if you have your favorite place to send people for more information about how to register to vote besides the state's website.
I don't know if we have a one that we are sending people to. I don't know if Jeremy can weigh in with that if we are using.
I always like the state's website because I expect it to be accurate.
Yes, we do have a EDF Action portal for this as well that can kind of give you all the information based on your address. So I will go ahead and drop that in the chat here. And so please, if you live in Virginia, please be sure to check that out because there is an election coming your way. Awesome. And so I'm going to take you guys off stage for a little bit, but we will kind of keep you around for Q&A later. But thank you so much for the great discussion and just the great background about the polling sentiment, the history, the work that we're doing. It's all so important right now, and I think really underscores why it's so critical that people really take action now to get involved.
So thanks, Alex.
All righty. And so for our last guest this evening, I want to welcome the president of EDF Action PAC in Virginia, or EDF Action Virginia, Jeremy Pittman, to the stage. He is going to talk to us about the work that we are doing on the ground to really make sure we get that climate majority that we have been talking about. So Jeremy, welcome.
Hi, Alex, thanks. Glad to be here.
Great. So really, first, what is EDF Action Virginia doing in these last 21 days before the election?
Great question. Well, we're going to try to do everything we can to help elect climate champions across the Commonwealth of Virginia. You've heard what's at stake from our colleague Emily. There's so much at stake from the climate resilience front as well as climate mitigation. So, a lot of action that we'd like to see in Virginia. And we know that we're more likely to see that action in Virginia if we have climate champions in the governor's office and in the state legislature. So critical elections just 3 weeks from today. And what we're doing with EDF Action Virginia, which is a political action committee in the state of Virginia, is really getting out there and encouraging our friends, family, and EDF Action members and supporters across the Commonwealth and across the country to get involved and to help talk to voters. When we think about elections, the candidates who are running for office, they need to talk to a lot of voters to get their message across and to encourage those voters to come out and vote for them. And we know that that the candidates can talk to voters with advertisements. If you live in or near Virginia, if you live in or near New Jersey, you've seen a lot of advertising. If you're other places, you may have seen a lot of advertising for local races. There's a lot of advertising that happens, but that's not the only way, and it's perhaps not even the best way to talk to voters. The best way to talk to voters is to reach them where they are, at their homes, to go and talk to them, at their door, or to reach them on the phone. And so the candidates, want to do that work, want to talk to voters at their homes, at their doors, on their phones, but they can't do it alone. Certainly a candidate running for governor of Virginia or governor of New Jersey can't talk to all the voters they need to talk to by themselves. And that's where we come in. We are able to reach out and support these candidates by joining their team, by joining their campaigns, and helping them contact voters. With just 3 weeks left until the election, there's a lot of work that needs to happen to talk to voters, to remind them that there's an election coming up. Believe it or not, many voters still will not be clued in, will not know that there's an election coming up. And often these are the voters that our candidates are counting on to come out and vote for them. So if we can help reach those voters by joining a phone bank or joining a canvas, and get out there on behalf of our candidates and talk to the voters to remind them about the critical election that's happening just a few weeks away, and help educate them about how to vote and when to vote and where to vote, that can make all the difference in these races.
Absolutely. And that's how I got started in this work, was with, good old voter registration, which I think is, civic engagement being the key to saving our democracy in this moment. So I really appreciate that. My question then, for folks who do want to get involved, either locally or out of state, where can they find more opportunities about phone banks and canvases?
Well, EDF Action Virginia, we have a page set up on the web that is pointing to all of the opportunities in Virginia to help elect Abigail Spanberger and the pro-climate candidates for the House of Delegates that we're supporting. So we're going to drop that link in the chat, mobilize.us/EDF Action Virginia, EDF Action VA. And if you go there, you will see scores of opportunities to get involved. Many of these are for folks who live in state. If you're able to go and join the door-to-door canvass to talk to voters at their door, that's fantastic. But no matter where you live, you can join a phone bank. And there are phone banks every day. Every day between now and the election, there will be phone banks where you can join. You'll hop on the phone bank. You'll get a quick training from a campaign representative, and then you'll be calling voters. And it all happens online on your computer, so you just log in. Makes it easy. These contacts are really, really important. I have to say, I've been out over the past couple of weeks and knocking on doors in both Virginia and New Jersey. And in both of these places, I talked to voters who weren't yet sure about when to vote or how to vote. And so these last touches that we make over these final 3 weeks are really going to be critical to help ensure that our climate champion candidates can get across the finish line. So mobilize.us/EDF Action VA. That's all the opportunities in Virginia. Encourage you to go on there now and think about what you can do. Find a date that works for you and a time that works for you. There are good opportunities every day across the next 3 weeks.
Amazing. That is so great to hear. I know I will definitely be getting on the phones and maybe even knocking some doors. So looking forward to it. Thank you, Jeremy. And now, I did mention at the beginning, we were going to have time for a Q&A, and it looks like we do have a few minutes left. So I will bring back Emily and Jack. Thank you both. And let me pull up some questions here, see what we got. Though, I guess one to get us started while I kind of look through some of the comments here, because I haven't been able to keep up. I'm curious sort of what, if any, trends we've seen from sort of other special elections that have happened already this year, and other sorts of elections. If there's any trends that we've seen, or glimmers of hope, maybe.
Well, I can start. I think we certainly have seen a lot of elections that have gone against sort of President Trump's acolytes anyway. I think that we've certainly seen the Democrats have outperformed Republicans in special elections, certainly, and by a larger margin than you might expect just based on the numbers. And that's consistent with sort of the normal midterm environment where the president's party is not doing a great job and not popular.
Jeremy, Emily, any thoughts?
Every 4 years, Virginia has these statewide elections for a new governor, since we have a one-term governor the year after a presidential election, and it tends to go the other way. So we will see how that goes this year, since Spanberger's really come out in front on these climate adaptation and mitigation policies.
Absolutely. I have another question here from Carol. asking, should we be worried about the threat of using the Insurrection Act to keep the midterms from taking place? I know that has been in the news a little bit. So curious what.
Let me take this one first, Alex. I think Carol from Rhode Island, thank you for the question. I understand that there are a lot of folks concerned about the threats to democracy and what is happening around the elections. And I'll just say that I don't know whether we should be concerned about what's happening on that front. But what I do know is that if we take it one day at a time and do what we can today, do what we can tomorrow, we'll be in much better place. And so I encourage you all to get out there and do what you can across these next 3 weeks to help elect champions for the issues that you care about. For us, climate champions, but certainly, get out there and work for the candidates that you care about across these next 3 weeks. Let's win these elections and then think about next year's elections. So I just encourage all of us to take it one day at a time. We've got 21 days left before voters cast ballots in Virginia for governor and House of Delegates, in New Jersey for governor and the state assembly, and in countless other state and local races across the country. So I encourage you to support the candidates that we care about, or find candidates that you care about and get out there and make a difference in these last 3 weeks. And if we put in a really strong showing in this year's elections in 3 weeks, we'll be in a better position for next year's elections.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Very excited about the work that's going to happen over the next 3 weeks. And I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I think with that, I will thank you all so much for the time this evening, especially everyone who joined us, but also for our panelists. Thank you for taking the time on a Tuesday to join us. And as a reminder, the link for the Mobilize for the EDF Action Virginia PAC is in the chat. I'll also put it up here on screen one last time. Go check out opportunities that are available to you. Thank you, Jack, Emily, and Jeremy, so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we will be back soon.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for everyone that tuned in.
Thanks, Alex.